the government recently reversed their decision to only have their free school meal vouchers within term time after the football player Marcus Rashford did an open letter to Boris Johnson, pleading him to #make the U-turn. And then they did. So now the school vouchers, the school food vouchers are going to be available to low-income families throughout the summer term. So even though the conversation is about talking, feeding hungry children, somehow some people are still finding a way to disagree with this. I wanted to ask you guys what you think. Should the state and the taxpayers be responsible for paying for poor children's food in summer holidays? What do you think about that, Sophie?
I think that if you're going to have children, I think that there is a responsibility for you to be able to provide for those children. I think that if you already know that you're really struggling and things are really tight, I don't think that's a situation that you should actively be trying to bring children into. I think for me that, I think you need to be responsible. But let me just say before I get crucified and cancelled, sometimes people do those stuff, but then life takes a dramatic turn. There's people who suddenly have an illness and can't work. There's people now who are getting made redundant and furloughed. It doesn't mean that they didn't think about their children 5-10 years ago. For me, I think there needs to be thought. But once the child is here, I think there's a social responsibility for that child to be looked after. However a child comes into the world, I wasn't planned. Like, neither was my sister. Do you know what I mean? Things happen. But so once the child is here, I think that the state does have responsibility, because I think a community is based on how they treat the most in need people. Like how you treat the people who need help the most, that is what really says something about your society. And if we're saying that children have no right to eat, then I think there's a problem there.
I agree. I think it's true. A society, a country is only as strong as what would be deemed as their weakest members of that community, of that society. So children, I think it's definitely the states, right? If we are going to be wasting money on numerous stuff that I can't even think to give you an example right
Royal
now.
weddings.
Come on. We'll be out here wasting taxpayers' pounds. But when it comes to children, there's an argument. Now, one thing I do hate, I hate the idea that people keep saying, oh, but don't bring children into this world if you can't. Do you know what? That is, I'm sorry, don't get twisted. I don't have any children, okay? And that's for a plethora of reasons. But I just think the idea of, oh, don't bring a child into this world if you're not ready to, it's like an over-presumption. We are presuming that the majority or a lot of these people are doing that when people aren't. I think the people that bring children into the world intentionally knowing that they don't have the money is actually a minimum. I don't think it's the majority. And we are living in a society where, unfortunately, as much as we think, oh, people are poor in Africa, people are poor in Asia, people are poor in the UK. There is a lot of poverty in the UK. So yes, it is the states' duty to be able, and I'm actually surprised that this wasn't being done before now. Like if you are giving children vouchers during term time, why is it that you magically think that these families can now afford to feed them out of term time? So why wasn't it being done before? So no, Marcus, good on you. And I'm glad the government made a U-turn.
Agreed. I mean, to be honest, it genuinely saddens me to see people so passionately against giving food to low-income families, And I think if you look at, there was a tweet by, everyone's least favourite television personality who no longer has a Twitter account.
What?
Good day for the internet. When you look at the replies to the tweet that she said, most of the people who were agreeing with her kind of had like a pro-England in their biography or something like that. And the England that they're being pro for is not an England that looks like us. Okay. So my gut tells me that most of the people who are reacting negatively to this have racially charged reasons for doing so. And the reason why I say that is because it is very rare for rich black people in the UK to be born rich. Mm-hmm. It is very rare for rich black people to not be famous. Mm-hmm. It's rare for poor black people to get rich in other ways that are sports and entertainment, right? So like the brown and black population in the UK is something like 13%, but the majority of the poverty population is us. So I think it's the type of children they're thinking that their money is going towards, right? And just as an example, so I don't know if you guys knew already, but in 1969 and 1970, the Black Panther Party started a free breakfast school club, right?
Yep.
And at the height of this program, they were feeding thousands of children in about 45 different places. And the head of the FBI at the time said that in light of all of the things that the Black Panther Party was doing, the free breakfast school program for those kids was the greatest threat that they did. The greatest threat. That's what the head of the FBI said in 1969 and 1970. And so the FBI at the time were doing things like beating up the Black Panther Party that was serving the children food in front of the kids. They were taking pictures of the children and keeping them on file to intimidate them. And the night before the Chicago branch of the program was going to open, the FBI actually went into the center, destroyed the food, and then urinated on it. Okay? So the teachers, the reports that from the teachers, from the kids that were attending these programs that were getting free breakfast, the teachers told the Black Panther parties that these kids were now paying attention in class. They were no longer crying from hunger pain, and they were no longer falling asleep in class. So we know the potential that an unstarved mind has. And there are certain groups of people that don't want to see Black and brown minds reach that potential.
Okay. The first thing I need to say is I've got to take it back on the sense, like, in London, yes, I think there is a very high rate of Black and brown people in poverty, but that's not necessarily the case within the whole of the United Kingdom. You look at other places, like places in Manchester, places in Liverpool, places in Glasgow, the high population of people who are living below the poverty line or at the poverty line are white. So I think it would be incorrect for us to say that it's only black and brown children who are at risk. They are at risk, but there is also a population who are white. Like, I think for me, it's not even necessarily just linked to race. I think there are some people who have absolutely no idea what it's like to be poor. And that isn't dependent on just one specific race, because something that Boris Johnson said was that, oh, he understands about his families. I'm like, how do you understand? Like, you don't understand. And if you did understand, you wouldn't say it's okay for children to go without meals, and for parents to have to go without meals, and parents to have to decide whether, because Marcus Rashford said people saying they're having to pick between paying their electricity or feeding their children. Nobody should be in that thing. But there are a lot of Black people who are not in the entertainment industry and are still doing well for themselves. Like, I don't think it's the highest proportion. I think it's the highest proportion that we're aware of. But I know lots of Black and brown people who are senior accountants, senior marketing, senior this, senior that. They are around. But yeah, I think we need to be very, very mindful of that. And I think one of the things that you said, which I think is so key, Luanda, is that tackling poverty doesn't just fill children. It brings down crime. It brings up education. It has so many other things that are linked to it. And I feel that when we're talking about, we want to tackle street violence or this, I'm like, it starts by investing in children and making sure that they're fed enough to be able to attend school and all these other different things. And I think it's so small-minded. So I'm very glad that he made the U-turn.
I agree with Sophie, just to put on that point of, I don't think it's a race thing. I think it's more of a class issue, just because when I went to university, which was outside of London, I'm a London girl, but I decided to take on a small city. Anyway, I went to university and I didn't realise at the time that this city that I had gone to was one of the poorest cities in the UK. And actually the year before I got there, it was declared the poorest city in the UK.
What city, babe?
I don't really want to get into it.
I can guess. I think I know what city is.
A BBC documentary was even made about it being so poor, and they played it in one of my lectures. And I was like, anyway, right? it's so poor that they had like the highest amount of food banks in that city. So I don't know if you guys know what food banks are, but a place where people can go and get free food. It's a lot of tin goods and things like that. And it wasn't like children that were going. It was lots of adults that were going for the food bank. And when I was in there and sitting around, I kept asking my lecturer, because I did sociology, I was like, where is the government? Like, does no one understand what's going on here? There's serious issues here. And they're like, oh, you know, the government, they're more concentrated in like London, different things. Us who are further out, like with our local MPs, there's not much of a focus, there's not much of a budget. And like, honestly, I kid you guys not, every couple of weeks you'd hear a story about people that were either committed suicide or killing themselves because they could not eat. And when I'd like come out of my lecture halls and things like that, there were so many people begging for money. There were so many people at the supermarket, standing at the supermarkets, literally begging. Everyone was like disheveled. And I was really shaken up by it, because I've seen homelessness and poverty in London, but I hadn't seen it to this extent. And I was just exhausted by it, because all these people that were coming up to me and I saw, they weren't black and brown. They were white. And I know that's even crazy to say, but I was kind of shocked, like, wow, they're doing the white people like this? Like, this is crazy. Like, I was like, this is crazy to me. And I thought,
they're doing Jill like that?
Yeah, like, this government does not this government doesn't particularly care about people. It's like, if you're poor, fend for yourself. So I'm not surprised that with the children, they were kind of like, no, girl, fend for yourself. But it's, as the saying goes, like, it takes a village to raise a child. We're all one community together. So I think it's important that we have these vouchers. Not only vouchers, I've always thought, why don't we have free summer schemes? You know that people can't afford childcare, and we know that, I don't know if you have, I don't know, I don't have kids, but when I look into the summer schemes for my nieces and nephew, it's like £100 odd a week per child. And it's like, which household can now afford this? And so I feel like the government should do more and step in for those deprived families. So, and then, as Sophie said, it's gonna have an effect on crime, on education, on even the economy. But they don't do it. So, sorry, I thought that was a rant, but they don't want to do it.
No,
it was a good point, because I was reading the child poverty facts and figures, and it was saying, I think it's reframing the way that we see people in poverty, because it said a lot of people who are living in poverty, which is like 4.2 million children, their parents have a job. One parent has a job, and the point is they're at minimum wage and they're not making enough to live. And it's a society thing, because it's just like, how can you have a job but you're still not able to make enough money to live? Like, you need to have a living wage. And that's why people are trying to bring in, yes, there's minimum wage, but what about the living wage? Because there's a complete difference between the two. Everything goes up in price, but then when your wage doesn't go up, how do you meet the shortfall when your travel goes up every year?
100%.
Goes up. Yeah. There's also still, I just want to say that there's also like still hope for good people who want to help, because, you know, even when it looks like the government wasn't going to make the U-turn, did you guys read that co-op back to Marcus? And they were like, okay, well, we can give kids food vouchers just from co-op, and they were going to feed about 6,000 kids when it looked like they weren't going to go back on, you know what I mean, making the U-turn and making the good decision to keep it in the summer as well. They were like, okay, well, this is how we can help, you know, as a company. And I feel like people should have the perspective that even if you feel like you have a small amount, you can still help someone. Because I think in the letter, Marcus was talking about how him and his mother relied on the good deeds of people. It wasn't the good deeds of institutions. It was just individuals that did this here and there, and they really helped. Overall, if you look at the grand scheme of things, they really helped his life overall. So it might feel like, okay, I can't do much, but everyone can do something.
Thing is, I think, is it Tesco? It's either Tesco, Asda, or Iceland who have this little thing where they have bits of fruit that kids can pick up in store. I'm pretty sure it might even be Sainsbury's, and it's just bits of fruit that kids can pick up in store and just eat, and it's free of charge. And even that, when you think about it, as small of a thing as it is, that does make a difference. So I think you're right. Unfortunately, these institutions have agendas that aren't always, you know, beneficial for the small people, for the impoverished people. So I think it really is, you know, as you say, it takes a community to raise a child. So it's just such a good thing that Marcus stood up and was so, you know, adamant about it, you know, and the fact that he had the experience of too, it just made the whole thing feel so real. And just, I think honestly, I think he helped without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that makes me sad is that it had to take somebody using their celebrity, like the voice.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
200,000 children go without a meal in the UK every day, like, or school children. That wasn't enough. Like, it had to take a celebrity footballer who was going to get more celebrities, and then you're thinking, oh well, there's going to be a debate in the Commons about it, and you don't want other Tories to be disagreeing, and it's gonna affect the party, so we'll just give the 120 million. And it just makes me really, really sad, but it shows what power we have when we come together on real issues.
Yeah,
exactly.
I just think that a society shouldn't be afraid of taking care of its most vulnerable members. Like, we should be taking care of the elderly. We should be taking care of people who have a disability. And we should be taking care of children from low-income families that can't otherwise feed themselves. Like, it's upsetting that it's even such a debate to me, you know?
Especially in a country where we're not short of food. That's the thing.
What?
We have more than enough food. There's so much food wasted every year. I'm like, the problem is not a lack of food. It's the fact that we don't want to make it accessible to people.
Yeah,
100%.